Worst part about nursing is bullying. Why is bullying nurses so normalized? That's so crazy how we can figure out with just a Google search how other professions are. And it seems like nursing is a high paid, high stress profession with a lot of bullying. And I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people who want to escape it. So I'm making this video for the nurses who want to escape nursing. In fact, I even know someone who is a nurse near retirement age, and I remember when I showed her how to pay off debt, she looked at me, and I remember the lack of emotion on her face, and I call it the poker face, debt payoff poker face, right? Because I show how to pay off debt, how easy it is. And we were doing situations where it's like, oh, this house gets paid off in like 5 years. The second house gets paid off in 3 years. And so in 10 years, you have like, I don't know, $1 million worth of real estate while keeping your job. And somehow you just get an extra like, $1 million in equity and $1 million in cash flow over 30 years or something like that. Right. And so I'm gonna tell you the number one way I think, in my opinion, how to get out of nursing or pretty much any toxic environment is just be debt free, right? I think it's a lot easier when you're debt free to get out of a toxic environment. And sometimes I forget in my position how much the world is a prison planet, But that's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna pay off debt as a nurse, and we'll say $175,000 of income, which is about 10 grand a month. Now, if you kind of think about it, the more money you make, 10 grand a month doesn't even seem that much. Well, someone who's making a 3 to 4 grand, 10 grand seems like a lot. But once you make more and more money, like it just becomes meaningless because you just end up spending more somehow, right? And you end up getting into more debt. So what we're going to do is pay off our debt using something called the velocity method. And you see right here, 10 grand of income, 9 grand of expenses, and we only have $716 left over. Now, if we made 2 grand of income and had $716 left over, that would feel a lot better than 10 grand, because this is what we would call living on the edge or possibly low margin, right? And so what we're going to do is first step is create the budget. So we have our budget here: income, expenses, leftover, checking, and savings, and then the expense breakdown, which is you list all of your debts and its associated payments. And we're just assuming we're fresh out of nursing school. So there may be some parts of this that may be unrealistic. Maybe you won't get the 10 grand a month salary right out of nursing school, but I just load this person full of debt just to see what it's like, right? So, you might be in a better situation than this person, this hypothetical person, if you've been at your career for like 10 years and you're, in a senior position. Okay. And then we have a mortgage here and we have our personal expenses not tied to debt. So we're just going to assume a conservative figure that, hey, we have enough to live, but um, we're going to be conservative with what we spend. We're not going to be reckless spenders, right? And so when you create this budget, it's important to list all of your debts because we're trying to figure out what our life would be like if we were debt free. And this last line item is just the personal expenses not tied to debt. So things we always have to pay for: food, gas, insurance, all that other good stuff, right? And so what we're going to try to show is, hey, even with the same income and the same expenses, okay, how can we change the flow of money so the outcome is much better? And so what we're going to do is we're going to change a few things, right? So what are we going to change? Well, instead of treating our checking or savings account as the final destination of our money, we're going to put our money into something called a line of credit. And what is a line of credit? It's basically a financial tool where you could borrow money, pay back, and then use it over and over again. So the only difference between the left side and the right side is that on the left side, your checking account is the final destination of your money, whereas in the velocity method, the line of credit is the final destination, and we treat our checking account as just a temporary stop. So money comes into our checking account and goes into a line of credit. Okay. Now, there are some people out there who don't even know how a line of credit works, right? So when you go to the bank's website, you literally just click a button and then you have cash immediately withdrawn to your checking account to however much is the limit. So with most lines of credit or home equity lines of credit, you could even click a button and they'll let you withdraw the whole, let's say 100,000, if they granted you that limit. Okay. And so we're going to assume that we have a free and clear line of credit, but here's something very unrealistic. I'm going to address the elephant in the room is that if you have good money and you have very little left over, will the bank give you a free and clear line of credit? The answer to that is no, because banks don't lend money to people who need it, right? So once upon a time, this nurse made 10, maybe a little bit less than 10 grand, but we'll just say good money and had no debt, right? And then the banks know this with all their targeted marketing, all the data that they have. So that's when they start to send you web ads, mailers, right? And if you don't think mail works, think about how much mail they send and how much money it costs them to send them the mail, right? They know it works. They have all the data in the world, okay? And so what they try to do is you have to think of each debt product kind of like, them sucking your blood, aka your life force, your money, through interest payments, right? And they're just taking a little bit over time. So that's how a bank works. It's they make money with little small payments over time, and the goal is that they'll have multiple small payments over time, right? Multiple small payments over time. And then once they have enough debt, they've essentially sucked your life force and they want nothing to do with you, right? That's just how banking works. And in fact, that's how a lot of life works in general. I remember I knew this older gentleman a while back, and he would say, he'd be like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I'm really rich, and I just like to go on vacation." And then he'll just say, "Oh yeah, in that job, they'll just work you to death, get rid of you as soon as you're useless to them, and replace you." And I'm like, "What?" I'm telling you, these old folks, they and I shouldn't use that term, but I'm using it in a caring and endearing way. They got the wisdom. You see what I'm saying? Like you don't hear that from people my age. They'll work you to get death and get rid of you as soon as you're useless to them. I love that bluntness, and I really wish that we had more of that, but it seems like we don't. And everybody wants to be fed their delusion. Anyways, all right, so let's go ahead and assume that we have a free and clear line of credit, but the bank will never give you this line of credit when you're in this state because banks don't lend money to people who need it, right? Because people who need money, according to the bank, are very, very bad people. Very, very bad people, right? Because they don't pay you back. That's really the number one reason why the bank will never lend money to people who need it. They have all the data in the world and they know that people who need money don't pay you back. Okay. Now, why do we use a free and clear line of credit is because with this unrealistic assumption, you will understand the importance of the line of credit. And it's actually much easier to show the debt payoff strategy if we had a free and clear line of credit. And actually, let me show you something. Give me one moment. So if you want to see a more realistic scenario, someone actually sent me their finances like 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. With this is the income, this is the expenses, and $4.10 left over, and 22 debts with the maxed out line of credit. And it took me 1 hour and 30 minutes to go over this. So if you want to see that more realistic scenario, that's you know I would say more complicated and took me a lot more time to figure out. Join the 99 cent YouTube membership. You'll get access to it, right? You'll get to see realistic, but I would say for educational purposes, much easier to understand if you have a free and clear line of credit. Now, the next step is that we're going to use something called the cash flow index, right? And the reason why I use the cash flow index is because it's a very simple way to figure out which debts to pay off first. So what is it? It's debt balance, right? You get the credit card balance or any other debt, the debt balance divided by the monthly payment. And then you rank them, right? And so you get the smallest to largest and you pay off the smallest ones first, usually below 50, and then the largest ones you pay off last, right? So why do we pay the 30-year mortgage last? Because literally we're giving the bank $330,000 for only $1,300 of cash flow, right? Whereas, you can pay these two credit cards 45,000 and you'll get more cash flow than that 330,000. So think about bang for your buck in terms of cash flow, right? And so what we're going to do is strategically move this debt into the line of credit. And let me just see how much credit card debt we have. And I'm going to just go ahead and do this. And that's 85,000. So let's go ahead and move $85,000 into the line of credit. And then this is where if you're a nurse, this is like your first step to freedom, right? You can get out of that, toxic nursing environment. And I hear, teaching is like this too. Although they probably, all toxic environments have their own different flavors, you know what I mean? Why am I laughing? I don't know. All right, so now guess what happens here? This is the part that'll blow your mind. See these credit cards? We just did a debt balance transfer. Oh my goodness. This literally went from $716 to $3,543.79 of cash flow. And if you take a look at this, you see how the income is the same? Yeah, the income is the same. The income is literally the same. But even though, like, we did not make more money, and somehow this got multiplied by like 5, right? So $3,543.79. And so now we take a look at this, and it's it's really funny how, just a snap, we just created more cash flow, right? And so now the final step is that you put your entire nursing paycheck in, that sweet 10 grand a month, take your expenses out, and then rinse and repeat over and over again. And let's see how long it takes for us to pay off that 85 grand. And if you want to just kind of show this, right? So it's just take your previous month's balance, previous month's interest minus the cash flow. So that's 3,543.79. That's how we get the next month's balance. But the line of credit does charge an interest rate. So if it's home equity, it's usually around 8 or 7. So what we do is to calculate the interest, we take the average daily balance, multiply by the interest rate, and then you divide by 12 because the interest rate is quoted annually, but they're calculating it monthly. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste, and then you see, whoa, the balance of the debt is going down and we didn't do anything, right? Right? We didn't do anything. Okay. So paycheck in, expenses out, paycheck in, expenses out. And then you rinse and repeat over and over again. And so now 26 months, it's paid off. So 26 months. So 85K. And I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this for the 5 credit cards. And then now we have the auto loan, student loan, and the mortgage. So now that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to put this in month 26. And then we see that these are the current balances of the loans, right? Now, I'm going to tell you how the average person thinks is that they're looking at the highest interest rate, right? They see that high interest rate and say, oh my goodness, let's tackle the student loan because it has the highest interest rate. And then, for whatever reason, they end up screwing up and they don't know what to do. And so, we don't necessarily, yes, you should look at the interest rate, but we don't necessarily only look at the interest rate, right? So if you take a look here, let's follow the cash flow index model. And then you see that this is 26 grand for $800 of cash flow, where this is 167 grand for $2,300 of cash flow. So the lower the number, the more you get bang for your buck. So even though this is a lower interest rate than the 7, we're going to tackle this one first, get that $800 of cash flow, and then tackle on the student loan. So let's go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to go ahead and do this. So let's pay off that car. So it's going to be plus 26,597.37. And then we're going to get that $800 back in our cash flow. And then now it's $4,000 of cash flow. Okay. And let's go ahead and do that. Control V. And then it's going to be 4372.54. And then now I'm going to copy and paste, and you see that in month 32, we paid off the debt. Oh my goodness, that was easy. 32 months. All right, so 32 months. This be, how much is that? Just 85 plus 45. So let's be 85 plus 45. And let's be 130K. And now we have the student loan and the mortgage. So we use our loan calculator to find out the current balance, the student loan and mortgage. Now, anything under 50 is usually fair game to move into a line of credit, but above 50, we got to be a little bit more careful. And above 100, we got to really be careful, right? So just a quick rule of thumb, if the interest rate is higher or same in the loan to line of credit, it's safe to move, right? This one is just 1% difference, so this should be safe to move into the line of credit as well. But the 30-year mortgage is the one we have to be careful of, okay? So what I'm going to do is just move this student loan into a line of credit and just pretend that this is a $200,000 limit now. Now, we don't have to have a huge line of credit to do this, and I'll show you with the 30-year mortgage. In fact, it's actually preferable not to do this with the huge line of credit. But let me just kind of, for the sake of time, just assume that we moved the loan, the student loan, into the line of credit. And so now this is going to be 0. We get an extra $2,000 back in our cash flow. And I'm going to go ahead and do this right here. Update our cash flow to 6694.71. And then let's see throughout time what the current balance is. And the current balance is 58, right? So 58,000, okay, is the balance of the debt, right? Or I'm sorry, not 58,000. 58 months is when the balance of the student loan goes away. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this. So 58 months. And then this is going to be 330K, right? So 330K. And then the mortgage, so let's go ahead and do this. So it'll be 58, and then this is going to be 0. And that's going to be 330,000 for that's the original balance. Now we have 294,000 left. Now some of you might be wondering, well, hey, you've been using this 8% line of credit, so this strategy failed with the 3% loan for 30 years. The answer may surprise you, right? It will not fail if you move the loan into the line of credit in small pieces, but it will fail if you move the entire loan into a line of credit. So there's several words you might hear like chunking, sweeping, moving a incremental piece of a loan into a line of credit. Now, you do have the default option of doing extra payments, but most people have a really hard time with this because think about it, extra payments is the default option that nobody does. Kind of like everybody knows they can overpay a credit card. So why don't most people overpay credit cards? Because overpaying a credit card introduces some friction in how money can be moved between, your debts and your accounts, right? Whereas with the line of credit, that is the only financial debt tool the bank offers where if you overpay it, you can get the money back immediately, right? And so that's why most people have a little bit of struggle doing extra payments, because if I overpay a loan, I can't get that money back. And then now you're going to complicate your banking by segregating your income, right? If you've never heard that term, it just means that when your income comes in, it gets split all over the place and you put the leftover in your checking and savings, which is the average American banking style. And the way that we've essentially got to here is putting all of our money into one place, right? That's what we quote call the velocity method. And so if you want to still just put your money into one place in a line of credit, well, we have this calculator that shows what happens that even if you use an 8% tool, that it'll be okay. So this is going to be a 3% mortgage. How much was the original balance of that mortgage? It's 330,000. So 330,000. What's the current balance? It is, I don't know. It's right here. 294,701.71. So 294,701.71. 701.71. And then what's the payment amount? It's right here. It's 1391.29. So 1391.29. And then let me just get the income and the expenses. So expenses, we've been really conservative, right? And, at this point, since the mortgage is our last debt, we don't really have to be that conservative. We could probably up our expenses $1,000 and we'd be fine. But let me just show you this. Okay. So let's assume that we're doing, let's say, $11,000 chunks, moving the principal of loan to a line of credit and then repeatedly paying off the $11,000 over and over again. Income in, expenses out, and just repeat the same process. So if you want to see how this looks like using this method in the spreadsheet, all we do is just add 11, move a small piece, move it into the line of credit, and then you see that 11,000 gets paid off in about 2 months or so, right? So okay, so let me just kind of show you here. So this gets paid off in 3.3 years. Now, I know a lot of people will freak out. Oh my goodness, you're using an 8% line of credit to pay off a 3% loan. Okay, well, let's just take a look at the difference between an 8% line of credit and a 1% line of credit, right? Because if the interest rate is the only thing that matters, let's see if it really makes a difference or not. So I'm going to put 1 here. Notice this is 16 grand. And now it made a difference of $1,000. Now, and this is over the life of the loan. right? Which is 3.3 years or the remaining balance of the loan. Okay. So yes, interest rate does matter. Obviously, one is less than eight, but it doesn't matter as much as you think you would, right? So a lot of people, they see this and they're like, wait a minute, it's not a big deal. No, it's not a big deal. And you have to use a line of credit strategically, right? Remember, the reason why a line of credit has a higher interest rate is because the bank is actually charging you more for easier access to your money, which is why a loan in general will have a lower interest rate than a line of credit, right? So there are exceptions to this, like intro periods and all that. But I'm just saying, as a general rule, a line of credit will have a higher interest rate than a loan because a loan is a one-way street because it's about how much access you get to your money. So because you get easier access, they're going to charge you a higher interest rate. But for our purposes, that's relatively negligible. It's making our life easier so we can put all of our money into one place and pay off our debt, right? Because this whole strategy, I'm going to break it down for you. All right. You know, if you deconstruct it, this whole velocity method or whatever we call it is literally just not saving money 2.0 with the help of a line of credit. Okay, that's literally all it is. All right. So 3.3 years, I'm going to go ahead and do this and I'm just do 0 and then it's going to be 58 divided by 12 plus 3.3 and then that's 8.13 years debt free. Okay, debt free. And actually, let me just at this point see what happens if we increase to $3,000. Okay. So obviously the timeline moves up, right? So 3.3 to 3.8. So it depends on you. If you want to live it up a little, go ahead and then you'll pay off your mortgage in 3.8 instead of 3.3. Okay. But this is how you pay off debt. And if you're a nurse, okay, this is the first step to freedom. Okay. All right. Well, that's it for today, folks. This is Crane Lanta Mentorship. Have a great day, and I'll see you on the next video.